Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's time for peak. Time for greatness. Some of the worst placed filler, the Aizen fight was a mess. But in terms of content, Bleach filler is so peak. I was very pleasantly surprised because I think I've only ever seen the Bount Arc, the superhero episode, and the one Don Kanoji episode with all the kids. Not like that. Basically, I have gone through every single episode of Bleach that's not the core story, otherwise known as the manga. And I'm gonna rank it all from worst to best because nobody asked me to. And because there's enough Soul Society Arc video essays already. I'm doing all the movies, all the filler episodes and filler arcs from the TV anime, and we also have one OVA from 2005. I'm not counting the Memories in the Rain OVA because that's literally just a retelling of episodes 8 and 9 combined into one with all the extra Rukia stuff cut out, you know, getting arrested for breaking laws and stuff. And on that note, wasting no time, let's just get straight into what you all came and on that note, starting off with number 36.
Very unsatisfying because I had to add one at the last minute. Tragic.
Ichigo Seppuku Persuasion Strategy. This doesn't even deserve a fart sound effect. Like, at worst, it's just kind of boring. If this is my least favorite of the filler, trust me, we're in for a good time. If you don't know about Riichio and the Kasumioji clan, don't worry because we will be tackling their story later on in the video. For now though, we'll just talk about Riichio's second stint in the world of the living, about 3 months after their arc in our time. Weirdly wedged in between the start of the Battle of Fate Karakura Town and Turn Back the Pendulum. So basically, Riichio pops up at Ichigo's high school, surprising him because, well, why is she here? And also because she came by herself without her attendants with her, which is very unusual. She's being stubborn and secretive, not, you know, trying to tell Ichigo what's going on. But after a little bit of poking and prodding, she eventually
is that Senna?
About Kenryu, one of her retainers, disapproving of her wanting to spend her time playing so much Kamari in Soul Society. You know, because she's the head of this noble clan, right? She has to be dignified. She can't play kid games. Kamari being this actual game that exists in our world that's kind of similar to Hacky Sack, where two teams kick a ball around for a little while, and the first team that drops it loses. Riichio actually wants to hold an entire Kamari festival in the Soul Society with her and her people, but again, Kenryu is vehemently against it. Things end up getting so bad that Kenryu threatens to commit seppuku. If you don't know what that is, deeming himself a failure to the clan for being unable to convince Riichio. Obviously not wanting Kenryu to off himself, Ichigo and his friends devise this plan to fool Riichio into forgiving Kenryu by staging this act of seppuku in front of her for her to see and to, you know, feel bad about it. After seeing this all go down, Riichio almost apologizes to him until Kenryu, as stubborn and pompous as ever, under his breath continues to diss the game of Kamari in front of Riichio's face, leading her to challenge him to a Kamari match, where the winner will have their ideas put forth, and the loser won't ever argue back again. Ultimately, the loser is Riichio. After her team drops the ball, which technically wasn't her fault, it was a hollow interference that, you know, caused a little bit of mayhem in the background, so she loses the bet. But then that's when Shu, Riichio's fiance, who, again, we'll get into all of this later, he shows up and reports that Riichio's whole Kamari festival idea actually went down extremely well with all of the commoners. So despite what Kenryu might think being a stick in the mud, everyone actually wants to play Kamari. The two finally come to their senses, they both make up and apologize to each other, and everyone returns to the Soul Society without anyone unaliving themselves. I mean, it's not a terrible story or anything, it's a nice little message about, you know, why you shouldn't be so stubborn. But the conflict here is really quite silly. And the animation is also kind of ass. Watching that Kamari game was like watching season 2 of Blue Lock. So it's at the bottom. But for what it's worth, I will admit, Kenryu wanting to commit seppuku over a children's game is exactly my type of absurdist dark humor. Like wow, that went left very quickly. At number 35, The Invisible Enemy. Again, another one that's not really bad, it's just kind of basic. I thought about grouping all of these episodes together, you know, the adventures of Team Toshiro in the human world while Ichigo does his visor training, but I decided not to because, you know, there are some episodes are better than others, and also because watch time. In the middle of the day, while out shopping, A hollow attacks nearby to where Rangiku is. In the process of taking it down, she discovers this plus spirit, a kid named Shota, who turns out to be a real smart aleck, let me tell you. She goes to perform a konso on him to send him to the Soul Society, but just as she goes to do it, he pleads with the Soul Reaper to let him stay in the human world for just a little while longer because he still has something that he needs to do. Oh, and then Ikkaku shows up and steals Rangiku's kill. That's tough. It's okay though, because this definitely won't be the last time we see it. It has this ability that allows it to replicate itself. And it could also like whistle a song that lures souls to it. And it can also disguise itself as the human souls that it's devoured. Why is this hollow so busted? The real reason why Shota wants to hang back in the human world for a little while and why he has such a bad attitude is because he's looking for his sister Yui, and he's beating himself up over abandoning her out of fear a little while back, which is very unfortunate for his sister because she then ends up getting eaten by the hollow that he ran away from. And then of course, the Yui that Shota finds is actually the hollow in disguise. However, with the help of Rangiku's guidance and Yui's soul still finding ways to protect her brother despite being controlled by a hollow, Shota musters up the courage to work together with the lieutenant of Squad 10. The both of them manage to successfully suss out the source hollow body, and Shota is finally exorcised to the Soul Society to reunite with his sister once again. Now, I do appreciate a good coming-of-age story, a boy conquering his fears and becoming a man and whatnot. However, I gotta be honest, I never really found myself that invested in Shota. The sister being a hollow was an obvious twist.
Ultimately, I just don't think this needed to be 4 episodes long. This could have easily been 2, maybe even just 1, you know, if you cut out all the miscellaneous hacks that they gave this hollow, only to really drag out its inescapably anecdotal existence, right?
Next, number 34. Kon is deceived. Rangiku on the lookout. Another Rangiku episode, sorta. She's kind of only in it for like 5 minutes. I feel like the only reason why I put this over the Shota filler is because it's only just 1 episode. Just like the Shota story, this is another story that focuses on a kid with a tragic backstory that I just simply don't care for. Sorry. Hey, at least the kid is alive this time. So one day, while walking down the street, Rangiku and Kon notice that this girl accidentally drops her stuffed animal off of a bridge. The kid being a kid, she then hops off of the bridge thinking that she can save it from the river below, and she ends up almost drowning. Thinking drastically, Rangiku forces Kon's soul candy out of his body and makes the most insane ultimate trick shot in history by throwing the candy into the mouth of the girl's stuffed animal. And yeah, she basically forces Kon to save this girl from dying because getting out of her Gigai would have taken too long. Obviously, a girl falling into a river attracts a crowd, so in the midst of all the commotion, Rangiku sneaks away, leaving Kon still inhabiting the body of this girl's stuffed animal to be taken home with the small child, under the impression that her stuffed animal, named Shintaro, saved her from drowning, which, I mean, is technically not untrue. It doesn't take long for Kon to accidentally blow his cover, but this only then makes the girl named Miyuki even more ecstatic. I mean, it kinda is every kid's dream. This is when the girl spills her entire backstory to Kon, still pretending to be her stuffed animal Shintaro, who's, you know, been there the entire time and should know her entire life, but he's feigning amnesia because of water damage. Basically, she comes from a toxic household, a comfortably upper middle class, but toxic household, where her parents argue all the time and they eventually split. She used to have this dog named Shintaro that was her only friend because, you know, social anxiety from, you know, being in a toxic household. Shintaro gets tragically run over by a car, RIP, and so that's why her stuffed animal has inherited Shintaro's name. Kon, being a really stand-up guy, wants to at least give her some sort of peace in her life at such a young age, so he decides he wants to take her to visit her old house. This, unfortunately though, attracts a hollow, made from the souls of Shintaro, her dog, and this other random Doberman for some reason. Kon tries his best to defend Miyuki, but gets absolutely wrecked. This is when Rangiku shows up in the nick of time. She takes out the hollow, and before pretending to die from injuries, Kon gives this really impassioned speech to Miyuki about independence and conquering loneliness and, you know, being your own person and stuff. It's cool, man. It's a cool little Kon story. Not my favorite Kon story or anything, but easily more digestible than the Shota stuff, and as you'll see throughout this video, Kon is the MVP when it comes to Bleach filler, man. Number 33, taking it to the Seireitei. Film Festival. Shinigami Film Festival. I mean, hey, Hey, bonus points for Rukia in the maid costume. In today's episode of Shinigami Shenanigans, the Gotei 13 are holding what is dubbed the Seireitei International Film Festival, where a bunch of different squads are working together to make movies to capitalize on the low-cost entertainment craze of movie theaters recently in the world, and also to help cover repair costs in the Seireitei because, I mean, you know, somebody has to pay for all these damages. We basically follow Ichigo wandering around the Seireitei, just seeing what everybody's up to. He first ends up getting, let's just say, persuaded into helping out Captains Komamura and Unohana with their movie about animals saving the world, basically. And this is hilarious because Unohana is just so passively threatening. And then the last half of the episode is him helping Renji with his film. Battle Maid Cop. Protect the Soul Society from the Space Invaders, to be exact. Renji, I see what you're doing. Byakuya is there for special effects, and by special effects, I mean just performing Kido spells. Rangiku is the maid cop's main antagonist and biggest rival. And Chad and Orihime somehow end up here too as extras. Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention that the Urahara shop is co-sponsoring all of this, in case you were suddenly wondering where they got all this filming equipment from. And yeah, I mean, it's basically just Ichigo getting taken advantage of by everybody for the entire episode. Renji and his film crew try to shoot the big epic finale on Sokyoku Hill, but they get stopped and chased down by the Omitsuki-do for not having a permit, and then the whole thing ends in a shit show. I'm loving all of the fourth wall breaks in this episode, man. I think the whole point about the movie theater craze from the now earlier in the episode is supposed to be a reference to the recession in the real world. You know, I don't really know anything about the history of Japanese economics, but I did research a little bit about the lost decades of Japan, about the country's economic stagnation and gradual decline due to inflation over the past 20 to 30 years because of a combination of slowed industrial growth and a bunch of environmental disasters that they just can't avoid for some reason, poor Japan. All just for this silly little episode about a bunch of ghost samurai shooting a movie on their off day. So hit me up for Japanese economics. Nanao also mentions that this is all a thing just to coincide with the release of the Hellverse movie, which leaves Ichigo utterly confused about. At one point, it's implied that Captain Kyotoku tries to shoot an adult movie, and now obviously put an end to that, which is hilarious. I'm just imagining Shunsui as an OnlyFans pimp now. We even get Unohana's true identity being teased here, with Kenpachi showing up out of nowhere trying to get a rematch against Ichigo, but ends up backing down after getting the death stare from Unohana. It's pretty good, man. It's pretty good. There's still a lot more funnier episodes to come, but this was still a fun idea. On to number 32. Back to my boy, the Soul Detective. Karakuraizer takes off again. Another sequel to an earlier filler episode, so a lot of this won't make any sense if you don't have the context. But basically, Kon is this superhero, the Konso cop, Karakuraizer, and he actually has this whole team of heroes with him made up of Tatsuki, Keigo, Chizuru, and Ururu. They help defend Karakura Town from hollows while Ichigo and the rest of the A-team, I guess, are away. And that's all I'll say for now. We'll get more into how this became a thing a little later on. In this episode, though, just as Kon is about to save your average plus spirit from a random hollow attack, that's when, out of nowhere, this pretty boy blondie in a top hat and a black suit suddenly intervenes and steals all of Kon's spotlight. As Kon stands frozen in disbelief, he's in Ichigo's body the entire time, by the way. The spirit girl is then starstruck by the man named Michelle. Turns out he's this extremely popular Samaritan, admired all throughout Karakura Town. Even the rest of the Karakuraizer team knows about him and wants to follow in his footsteps, which leaves Kon both confused and depressed because, well, he kind of just came out of nowhere. Who even is this guy? And then also because he's being completely overshadowed by this guy and he's taking all of his hoes. Kon was onto it from the jump. Like, we all know Chizuru likes girls. Things only get worse, though, when they unexpectedly run into Michelle signing autographs outside. And from here, he basically takes the entire Karakuraizer team under his wing. Kon, on the other hand, continues having this existential crisis, visioning Orihime and, most importantly, Rukia, both kicking him to the curb. Again, absolutely worthless in the shadow of Michelle. Fast forward a little bit, and Tatsuki is actually the first person to start coming to her senses, but then that's when Keigo, Ururu, and Chizuru all pass out around her, getting their Ryatsu drained from them by these capes that Michelle gave them earlier in the episode to look just like him. It's revealed that he's actually a hollow, created by the evil Arankar chick from the first Karakuraizer episode, and he proceeds to enact his plan to conquer Karakura Town on her behalf, but then that's when Kon shows up, unaffected by Michelle's brainwashing because he's a mod soul. Kon steps up to him and gets kinda bodied, but thanks to a distraction by Tatsuki, he's able to finally land a punch on him, which knocks one of Michelle's teeth out, and seems to break his illusion cast on the entire town. Michelle loses it and transforms into his big bad hollow form, but is ultimately taken down by the Karakuraizer's ultimate attack, the Riser Beam. The Arankar chick back at her hideout has a meltdown, and Kon finally regains his place in society. Like I said before, man, Kon is the man. Kon really be like Super Saiyan 3 Goku, bro. If I don't, you will. You know, sure, there was a little assist from Tatsuki somewhere in the middle of it, sure. But for the most part, he pretty much defeats the villain all by himself. Again, still not my favorite Kon episode or anything. It's not even my favorite Karakuraizer episode. Hey, I just love seeing my boy get a W. Now, number 31, Yachiru's friend. The Shinigami of Justice appears. Ah, yes, the episode where Yachiru cheats on Kenpachi. Of course, I'm only kidding. Or am I? This episode is all about Yachiru running into an old friend of hers named Masayoshi, and also this woman named Mayu who Masayoshi saves from a hollow early in the episode. Masayoshi is this rogue Ronin type of character wandering the forest of the Soul Society, determined to eliminate every hollow that exists for justice! Justice for losing his wife in a hollow attack many years ago. The twist though is that Masayoshi is actually a hollow himself, the same exact hollow that killed his wife years back, tweaked out of his mind after his entire body got possessed. Just as he's coming to this realization though later in the episode, that's when a wild hollow suddenly appears. You'll probably be hearing that a lot throughout the course of this video. And that's when the partially hollowified Masayoshi, kind of going through his whole Obito thing, trying to maintain his sanity with a demon trying to take over his body. He sacrifices his life to protect Mayu in an attempt to at least somewhat atone for his past transgressions. It's your average hollow identity theft mixed with the also pretty common rogue Shinigami plot. Honestly, I just appreciate Yachiru's role in all of this. She never really fights, which is unfortunate, but she was kind of suspicious of Masayoshi from the jump. She offers him some candy early in the episode, but he declines, which is when Yachiru remembers later on that he used to actually really love sweets, and that makes her even more on edge. We have this whole scene at the beginning where we see Yachiru warning the girl, Mayu, not to get too close to Masayoshi, which is great foreshadowing. There's a bunch of foreshadowing all over this episode. This episode is honestly cool as hell. Yachiru and Kenpachi the lumberjack, for some reason, elsewhere doing his own thing, blown off steam by chopping down trees, I guess. You need my help, Yachiru? No, I got it, Kenny. And then we cut back like nothing even happened. Masayoshi back on his fearless and noble quest to slay every hollow in existence. And yeah, it's a shame that we don't really get to see her fight, but seeing Yachiru still living up to her position as a lieutenant of the 11th Division, you know, it shows that no, like she can be really competent and lock in when she wants to. All right, back to the buffoonery. Number 30, top 30. Side story, Ichigo and the Magic Lamp. Ichigo wakes up in a mysterious desert, dressed in equally as mysterious Arabian garb, and finds out that he and all his friends have different names. Instead of Ichigo, it's Chigo, Orihime, Uryu, and Chido. But it's okay, because Uryu, not Uryu, does indeed confirm that this is all just a dream, and it doesn't really matter, so don't think about it too hard. Uryu then explains that they're actually in the middle of searching for this secret treasure, and that they are on their way to break into a mansion and steal it, because the owner, Urahara and not Urahara, is known for collecting all types of rare jewels and treasure, and probably has it. After getting chased down by Tessai, Jinta, and Ururu, who don't have new names for some reason, they all decide to lock themselves in a room. Ichigo, despite being a complete skeptic, rubs the oil lamp to see if it can, help them get out of this sticky situation. Out pops our magical genie, Ruki, and not Rukia. Ichigo and his friends attempt to make a wish, only for Ruki to deny them on the basis that 1, Ichigo has a tainted heart because he doesn't believe in magical genies. He's actually kind of just disrespecting her in her face, saying that she doesn't have any powers. Eventually, Ichigo concedes, and Rukia agrees to transport them to a very cramped bathroom stall, which of course they're unhappy about. Ruki is about to give them their third wish. Yes, I said third wish because Orihime wasted the first one on a cake, because the first wish always gets wasted. But then this is when Ruki suddenly disappears, leading to another genie, Renjin, not Renji, appearing in her place, explaining how Ruki is now set to be executed for breaking the laws of the Lamp Society. The Lamp Society. This is when Yoruichi appears as a magic carpet and not a black cat. despite a black cat being with them for the entire episode. From here, it's basically just a speedrun retelling of the Soul Society arc, which is kind of crazy. Ichigo has to find his actual Zanpakuto. He blocks the Sokyoku, which in this universe is just a regular bird that he can just kind of grab with his hands. And then he has the big decisive battle with Byakuya at the end. After all is said and done, after spending the entire episode trying to wish himself out of the dream as selfless as ever, Ichigo instead uses the last wish for the snow crystal. And then the twist at the end is that this was indeed a dream, but it was Isane's dream and not Ichigo's. And she's also being haunted by fish cakes for some reason. It was a 10-year celebration for the Bleach manga, which is cool. You know, this was inspired actually by one of Kubo's color spreads. I'm not quite sure how I feel about there being a random stuffed prop of Komomora's severed head just chilling in the Uravita mansion. Number 29, Gaiden Again. This time's enemy is a monster. This is another one that takes place in a dream world. And this is also kind of like a Halloween themed episode, which is odd because this came out in January. Basically, Ichigo and the rest of the main cast, pretty much, they all wake up as a bunch of different creatures of the night. Ichigo is Frankenstein. Uryu is a vampire that drinks milk instead of blood because of his pride as a Quincy. White is right and all that, but then this makes him anemic because he's low on blood. Renji is a mummy, but really a pirate covered in scars that had to be, you know, covered in bandages. Kaizoku oni Oreoanaru. Okay. Rangiku is a witch. Rukia is a succubus. Interesting. Toshiro is a femboy werewolf. What on earth do they got my boy wearing? And then you have Orihime, who's just a chill girl in a pumpkin costume. They all sit at a round table and have a meeting about the hunters. No, not those hunters. The monster hunters that they have to defend this castle from that they're currently in. What the monster hunters want? The same snow crystal from the Magic Lamp story, but in this dream world, it's said to have the power to turn monsters back into humans. So in a weird way, this is kind of like an inverse of the Magic Lamp story. Instead of trying to find it, now they're trying to protect it. Ichigo immediately abandons his friends to go retrieve, seeing it as his escape from the dream world. Ichigo gets stopped by a wild Momo though, and this is when the monster hunters finally arrive. The dads, Ryuken and Ishin. Obviously the fathers clash with the sons, before it all ends up becoming just an all-out battle royale. Using Ichigo as a decoy, Uryu manages to set up a Springer attack, giving the group enough time to escape the castle and surrender the snow crystal, because they realize that they are completely outmatched. However, when they go to retrieve it, they discover that it's not there. Ichigo and Uryu prepare for a final ultimate battle against their dads, but Ishin and Ryuken decide to just leave instead, chalking it up to the game, assuming that somebody else must have already stolen it. This is when Rukia appears for the first time since the beginning of the episode. Where did she go for the entire time? And she tells Ichigo that she was actually the snow crystal all along, much like how in the actual story she had the Hokyoku inside of her. But then this is when Rukia bops him on the head, turning him into Komamura, which is when Komamura then in the real world finally wakes up. Yeah, the last episode was wacky. This was even more wacky. This and the Magic Lamp, they both feel like acid trips. But I'm gonna be honest, this episode I just think is funnier. The running gag, literally running gag of Ichigo constantly trying to sneak off and grab the crystal is funny. Toshiro refusing to acknowledge his canine instincts and Rangiku bullying him for it, treating him like a dog, that's great. Uryu and Ryuken's arrow beam struggle basically coming to an end when Uryu's 1200 arrow limit is usurped by Ryuken's 1201. That's just silly. This whole episode is silly, man, but this is still nowhere near as silly as it can get. What's next? Number 28. It's Zanpakuto Unknown Tales Part 2, the Toju Campaign. You know, I just don't understand who asked for this. Why do we need this? The Muramasa arc had a beautiful ending, which, you know, we'll get to later. These, like, 10 or so episodes after he's defeated, they kind of just feel like a hangover. The leftovers that you're stuck eating for like a week after the holidays. In the wake of Muramasa's defeat, the effects of his abilities still linger for a little while longer in the Soul Society. So the Zanpakuto for now remain in their anthropomorphic forms. The problem though is that there are still also many other manifested Zanpakuto out there causing trouble, rampaging out of control and without masters because they all either disappeared or died. So this is basically a series of episodes, Monster of the Week stories throughout the Soul Society and the human world, eliminating all the sword beasts. Some episodes are better than others. I thought the episode where a sword beast infiltrated Karakura High School and befriended Orihime was kind of boring as hell, but the episode where Kazashini just wants to murder everything but ends up getting stuck babysitting, that was honestly quite hilarious. The episode where Hinako falls in love with one of the sword beasts is kinda dumb, but the episode where Nanao tries to get along with the younger version of Katen Kyokusu, it's really sweet and wholesome, you know? Personally, my favorite episode is when the snake half of Zabimaru ends up getting manipulated by a sword beast and runs away. It's honestly quite a wonderful depiction of a child's yearn for independence, you know, at a certain age, only to realize that being an adult is not all it's really cracked up to be. Trust me. I think a major flaw in this arc, though, that cannot be ignored. The sword beasts, the Toju, they end up feeling so irrelevant. Like, most of the episodes tend to really focus on strengthening the bonds between the Zanpakuto and their Soul Reapers. You know, until this random fodder sword beast shows up towards the end. The last episode is a real tearjerker, though, when all the Zanpakuto say their final goodbyes before returning to sword form. But honestly, man, and for the people watching this week to week, like, that know the Ichigo Ukiura fight is right around the corner, again, this kind of just felt like a giant waste of time. You know, I've kind of had my fill after the whole Muramasa thing. Number 27, the beautiful Patissier Yumichika. This is another episode about Team Toshiro frolicking about in the world of the living while Ichigo trains to get his hollow mask. Specifically, this episode is about Yumichika being a guide for this kid named Rin. No, not that one. A young boy from Mayuri's division who was sent to the human world to conduct research on the Iran car, and then Hanatero's with him too as an escort. Rin's sweet tooth finds him making a pit stop at a bakery, and then this is when the group discovers the spirit of a chef bound to the shop. Yumichika prepares to send him to the Soul Society, but the chef pleads with him to let him stay for a little while. At least long enough so that he can find a way to let his mother try one of his cakes, which she never got a chance to before he died. Obviously, the ghost can't bake a cake, so Rin and Hanatero, 3rd and 4th seed of the Wholesome Division with Lieutenant Yuzu and Captain Orihime, they offer to try and replicate the guy's recipe, much to Yumichika's chagrin. After much trial and error, the group finally gets the recipe right, only to be turned down by the mother, who was understandably traumatized by the sudden passing of her son and still grieving, not even able to look at the cake, let alone taste it. The son, though, Heita, he refuses to accept this, and after almost ruining the cake after it falls through his hands trying to grab it and feed it to her, all of this anguish of his mother rejecting the cake, it has him trying to break his chains of fate, which causes his Ryatsu to then start leaking out, which attracts a freaking Menos Grande. Hanatero, however, springs into action using his Zanpakuto Hisagomaru to absorb all the damage to Heita's chain and redirect it to attack the Menos, which stuns it long enough for Yumichika and Fujikujaku to finish it off. Then Rin, using this very strange looking device that can actually project souls to make them visible to humans that he used earlier in the episode at the bakery shop, he uses it on Heita, and the ghost of her son, basically, finally convinces the mother to try the cake, to which she finds delicious. The whole Patissier aspect of this is kind of mid, but watching Yumichika grow to take pride in his work after being so against it at the beginning of the episode, it's a pretty fun character journey for him, I will admit. Hanatero Zanpakuto might be the most underrated. Like, it's not that powerful or anything, but being able to convert injuries into attack power is just extremely convenient. Alrighty, number 26. Ikkaku, the hot-blooded Kendo tale. Hot-blooded is the perfect way to describe it. So, Keigo's sister and Ikkaku's sneaky link, Mizuho, she asked Ikkaku to help train up the school's Kendo club in preparation for a tournament coming up real soon. Ikkaku, being from Squad 11, proceeds to make the boys' lives a living hell. There's this one kid, though, Shinji Iijima, who ends up admiring Ikkaku and his efforts so much and ends up becoming so determined to improve his skills that he is now the only one left in the club by the time the tournament comes around, because everybody else was too afraid of Ikkaku's drills. Seeing as how there's nobody else on the team now besides Ikkaku, Shinji, and Keigo, being held hostage pretty much by this point, Ikkaku resorts to, let's just say, some indirect tactics to convince Renji and Toshiro.
Bro, what are you doing to that lollipop? Oh my goodness.
It's a 5-on-5 Kendo match. First to 3 wins. Obviously, the Soul Reapers, Renji and Toshiro, easily wash their opponents, but Keigo fumbles the ball tremendously, leaving only Shinji and Ikkaku left. And this is when suddenly, say it with me now, A hollow attacks. Ikkaku, shrugging this off as no big deal, he goes to help defeat the hollow, only to return to find Shinji actually won his match in the entire tournament for Team Karakura High. This you would think would make Ikkaku a proud papa, but he instead gets furious at not being able to compete and challenges the entire opposing team by himself 5v1, where he absolutely dominates. Tragic. This episode is great. Really fires you up, right? Really motivates you. Seeing Shinji be so dedicated to becoming a better fighter, stepping up to the plate, proving everybody wrong on the big stage with the light shining bright. I think Ikkaku would make a great personal trainer. Number 25. Kon is seen. Secret of a beautiful office lady. Back at it again with the true main character, bored and basically trapped inside of Ichigo's bedroom, as restless as ever. Kon notices Ichigo giving fine shit some direction. Later on, in Ichigo's body, taking a walk after Ichigo himself had to leave to go and take care of a hollow, Kon notices the same woman about to jump off of a bridge. What is up with everybody trying to unalive themselves? Kon goes to rescue her, but he ends up being the only one to fall in the water when the woman hesitates at the last minute. She introduces herself as Haruko and confesses to Kon that she was thinking about jumping because her hermit of a boyfriend broke up with her, thinking that she was a weirdo because she keeps talking about how she's able to see ghosts and stuff. Boyfriend. Bro, I promise, compared to what's out there nowadays, that's like level 1 crazy. Actually, that would kind of come in clutch. And she can cook? Oh yeah, you fucked up. Meanwhile, Ichigo and Rukia are both out investigating a hollow that can infiltrate and control people's bodies even while they're still alive. Kon continues to simultaneously be this girl's therapist, I guess, and I don't know, Duke Dennis. That's when this hollow that kind of looks like a tapeworm suddenly shows up and tries to force itself inside of Haruko's body. Kon does what he can to protect Haruko, and as soon as they escape and she's about to finally confess her love for him, that's when Ken, her ex, shows up, expressing remorse over how their relationship ended. Haruko accepts his apology, and Kon prepares to just walk away, disappointed, but still wishing them happiness. That is until Ken ambushes Haruko, because the hollow was possessing the boyfriend's body the entire time. Kon comes back and forces the hollow out of her body, but then ends up getting shoved into a tree, which makes him cough up his soul candy. Just before the hollow can eat it, that's when Ichigo and Rukia shows up, and he Getsuga shows the shit out of the Diddy hollow. Haruko finally confesses her love for Kon, which confuses the hell out of Ichigo because he's back in his own body now, but it doesn't even matter because wipes their memories anyway, and the couple just resume their normal lives, which kind of leaves Kon left in the dust. It's unfortunate. It's a thankless job, Kon. Right, so I kind of feel like Haruko's issues don't really get resolved here. Erasing her memory is cool, but it doesn't really take away her ability to see spirits. So what exactly is stopping them from getting into another argument about it? It's not exactly the most neatly tied up ending in the world or anything, but it is funny. All right, on to number 24. This is a classic. A classic this low in the list? It's the Karakuraizer Arc. Some might think this is a little low. Everyone knows about the Karakuraizer, right? The great Saiyaman of the Bleach universe, because every anime needs at least a little bit of Super Sentai sprinkled in. While Ichigo and the rest are away in the Hueco Mundo trying to rescue Orihime and all that, Karakura Town is left defenseless against hollows, besides Kurabadani, I guess. So Kisuke takes it upon himself to wake Kon up out of his sleep forcibly, putting his candy in Ichigo's body and making him the new first line of defense. The Konso Cop, the Karakuraizer, complete with a cool suit designed by Uryu, and a superhero watch. So again, the great Saiyaman influence is there. Urahara then just throws Kon into the deep end with no floaties by having him fight this hollow, which he defeats using his ultimate attack, a bunch of reishi focused into a singular blast called the Riser Beam. We already, you seen what he did to Michelle. Kon is feeling quite pleased with himself. That is until a bunch more hollows now show up, and this is troublesome because Kon can only use the Riser Beam once per transformation. This is when the entire Karakuraizer team arrives for backup. The runner-up MVP of filler, Don Kanoji, Karakuraizer Beast, Ichigo's friend Tatsuki, Karakuraizer Delicate, Ichigo's other friend Keigo, Karakuraizer Erotic, longtime Orihime simp Chizuru, and Karakuraizer Tiny Devil, Ururu, because Ururu just be here for the vibes. They all managed to defeat the hollows, and for Keigo, by defeat, I mean running away from with the utmost urgency. But it's not over yet, because the designated guardian of Karakura Town, Zenosuke Kurumadani, don't you ever forget his name, he suddenly turns up, and he's all bleeding out and injured and stuff, which is when an Iran car appears not too long afterwards. The whole next episode is basically just about the group infiltrating this giant fortress in the sky and also exploring each of the Karakuraizer team's abilities a bit more. Chizuru has this super erotic mode which is exactly what you think it is. Keigo's suit was made to ensure that his skills of running away would make him practically untouchable, and the perfect decoy as well. Don Kanoji is actually genuinely useful, gathering all the intel on the invading hollows and the base. And then Tatsuki and Ururu are just the actual fighters of the group, standing on business. Eventually, Kon uses one last riser beam to destroy the heart of the fortress, and Urahara follows it up, completely obliterating it using Benihime. Then Kisuke just puts everyone to sleep, and he starts preparing for Aizen's winter invasion. You should know how much I appreciate underutilized characters getting something at least somewhat important to do in the background while all the main characters are off, doing the plot. There are other characters still out there in the world still doing stuff while we're just focusing on this one specific person's story over here. Nobody asked for this, but I can say that now, hey, I'm no longer wondering what's happening back in Karakura Town while Ichigo and his friends are gone, which they are a lot. Because now this is a thing. Number 23. Back to the serious stuff for a quick moment. Theater opening commemoration. The Hellverse Prologue. The staff at the Urahara shop are going on vacation. That's it. That's the entire episode. Before they go, Kisuke mentions to Rukia that there have been some strange Shinigami attacks occurring around town recently, and that they're strange because there's no traces that a hollow was responsible. Rukia goes to investigate, and she finds Kurumadani once again popping up, struggling against none other than Shrieker, the hollow with the exploding leeches that basically served as our introduction to Chad way back in volume 2 of the manga. He's back in the world of the living, but no longer as a regular hollow. Instead, he's a Togabito, a sinner, condemned to hell because, in his past life, he was a serial killer. Rukia is understandably confused by this because no one should be able to escape hell. A perfectly adequate rematch between the two then commences, this time with Rukia able to actually use her powers. Kurumadani tries to help, but ends up just getting in the way. Shrieker manages to get the upper hand on Rukia, which is when Renji then pulls up for backup. The two lovebirds then work together to send Shrieker packing back to hell where he belongs. Cut to the Seireitei, and there's a captain's meeting discussing today's mysterious events that ends with Yamamoto ordering a full investigation of hell, as well as that Ichigo must not know about this because they don't want him involved. Which obviously Ichigo ends up getting involved. Cut to the bowels of hell now, and we see Espadas 8 and 9, Xyolopero and Aronero, about to kill each other, but then also wondering where they are. This is then when Shura, one of the main antagonists of the Hellverse movie, he pulls up with his goons and introduces himself to the two Espada. Well, the Espada chose violence today, but despite being in fully released Resurrection form, they get completely brushed aside. Shura expresses his disappointment in them, stating that he at one point was planning on using their power to force open the gates of hell, but instead now sees Ichigo Kurosaki as his only option. And to find out what happens after this, well, you gotta go to the theaters and watch the Hellverse movie. Or, you could just watch it for free on YouTube because the movie came out 12 years ago.
You didn't hear that from me.
And yeah, this is a perfectly serviceable prologue. It tees up the story real nice, which the film then knocks out of the park. Again, we'll talk about that later. It's great to see Rukia get a random episode to herself for the most part, with an extended fight scene and everything. I do wish we could have seen the Espada show up in the actual movie because they were shown here, but I also kind of see this as a prologue to the Hell arc, that Kubo may or may not give us at some point. It's now been 3 years since that one shot. Number 22. Hueco Mundo Civil War, Ulquiorra's death. The Hellverse prologue was pretty cool, but this honestly caught me off guard. It's filler that isn't just a standalone, completely separate side story. This is an extension of the main story that I don't doubt might have actually happened. It's a story about some Arrancar rebelling against Aizen and stealing the Hogyoku, basically. The main Arrancar, whose name is Patros, he backstabs Ulquiorra, steals the Hogyoku, and takes the orb to the Urahara shop in the human world because, well, the only person that knows how to use it is Kisuke. Kisuke is away. Instead, he meets Renji, who prepares to defend the shop from the Arrancar while the other Soul Reapers clash with all of his subordinates elsewhere in Karakura Town. While all this is going down back in Hueco Mundo, it's revealed that, of course, this was all a part of Aizen's plan, using Kyoka Suigetsu to make Patros think he had killed Ulquiorra and stolen the Hogyoku, when in reality the orb was a fake and Ulquiorra is totally fine. currently scoping out the scenery in the human world, gathering information on Orihime. Patros' subordinates get taken out by Team Toshiro, and with the help of the Matsos reading Kurodo and Noba, Renji successfully defeats the head renegade Arrancar with a Hikotsu Taiho. And yeah, again, this is just really fucking interesting. Patros is kinda ass. His ability is just a series of basic projectile sword slashes with different levels of power.
You suck!
Hey, I can dig his mission statement, the idea of Arrancar rebelling against the Aizen, a former Soul Reaper that did just kind of waltz into Hueco Mundo and turn it into his dictatorship out of nowhere. Again, it's not something we needed to make the Arrancar saga better or anything. Nobody asked for this, but it does just add a little bit more to it. Number 21. Delusion roars. Hisagi towards the hot spring inn. Shuhei and Rangiku in this episode are staying at this inn together while they're in the middle of investigating some murders going on in the Rukongai. Isane was originally assigned to this mission as well, but I think she recognized quickly that she was going to be the third wheel and just went home. She just disappears at a certain point in the episode. And yeah, the whole story here is Shuhei is overthinking whether or not Rangiku is into him, because he has a crush on her. This all culminates when later on in the episode at the end, Rangiku wants to take a bath, but she's acting a little bit weird about it, which Shuhei misinterprets to mean that she wants him to join her, which has him all, flustered and stuff, understandably. In reality though, Rangiku, still in uniform by the way, she was just preparing to take out the hollow that they were investigating the entire time. That turned out to be the hotel manager that invited them to stay at the inn in the first place. And she only used Shuhei as bait, basically, to lure out the hollow because of rumors that its only victims have been handsome men. Hey, Shuhei. A win is a win. This whole thing between Shuhei and Rangiku, it's one of the most adorable things, man. Here we have the respectable young man, Shuhei, working his ass off not just to rise up in the ranks of the Gotei 13, but also to earn the recognition of all of his peers. Specifically one peer that really happens to tickle his fancy. Resident Soul Society city girl, Rangiku Matsumoto, who probably has a bunch of other dudes with verification checks in her DMs already. Every time, man, when Shuhei's having these, Death Note style inner monologues trying to read Rangiku's non-existent flirting is hilarious. I feel like anything from here on out is just timeless entertainment. It's something that I could watch at any time. I'm not really trying to, no disrespect to Patros, right? But I'm not trying to get into anything too deep. Right. Hey, but my boy Shuhei is. All right, let's get it with the top 20. The Shinigami enter battle. Seireitei also has a New Year special. Here we have the last Bleach filler ever. Still, to this very day. Smack dab in the middle of the Fullbring arc because fuck it, it's New Year's. This is back during the 17-month time skip after the defeat of Aizen. The new year has come around for the Seireitei, and Lieutenant of Squad 3, Izuru Kira, for some reason, is in charge of all the festivities. He decides to host a kite flying competition between squads, which is supposed to be just this friendly little gathering of Soul Reapers on their day off, but quickly dissolves into chaotic death battle for supremacy between all the divisions. Quite literally, when it comes to Ikkaku and Soifon. Yeah, the main reason why this episode is as high as it is for me, though, is because of the Rukia Renji story, man. So Rukia is extremely nervous about having to perform this sacred Kuchi dance for the new year, which has been a tradition for generations. Not only is she nervous about performing the dance in general, not wanting to disappoint the clan and everything, specifically her brother, but also because the previous person to do the dance was her late sister, Hisana. She goes through a little practice run for Renji, and he says it still looks weird, so he takes her to the 11th Division barracks, of all places, for help. But all that happens anyway is Renji just gets thrusted into Kenpachi's training. So he decides to make the more logical decision of going to Rangiku instead. And Rangiku's whole thing is, she wants to give Rukia a bit of her feminine charm, right? Rukia performs the dance again for Renji, but he wasn't paying attention. Instead, he's working on his calligraphy and suggests Rukia should too, as it can often be very relaxing. This leads to a whole argument between the two, because Renji isn't taking all this very seriously. It turns into a tussle over the ink, which Renji then accidentally spills on the kimono that Rukia has to wear for the performance. This extremely expensive kimono that took weeks and weeks of painstaking tailoring to make. This pisses Rukia off greatly. Fast forward a little bit, after a night of sulking and having this dream about her ex, Karin. Why did I even say that?
This is just me being toxic, man. Karin was like a sensei to her. She wakes up and realizes that the kimono has been mysteriously replaced. A wild Byakuya then appears to inform Rukia of the most important aspect of the dance. It's the attitude, you know, that you bring to the performance, the vibe. And it's at this moment that she realizes that the entire time, Renji was only really just trying to help her relax. Hence why he said earlier that her dance kind of looked weird. She was too tense, probably too stiff, and reeked of nervousness. He also pulls up to watch the performance. You love to see it. Now, there is another New Year's Bleach special on this list that I do kind of favor a little bit more. I do really like the absurdity of the kite flying contest. Again, the best part of this episode is the Rukia Renji thing. I don't know why, but I'm getting mad Sokka vibes from Avatar: The Last Airbender, from Renji in this episode. Is it just me, or is bro acting like unusually quirky? On to number 19. Let the shenanigans continue. Cry of the Soul. The Rug Shinigami is born. This is just stupid, man. A good kind of stupid. Ikkaku and Yumichika are once again in the human world investigating this hollow-related disturbance, and they need a place to crash. Ichigo declines, so instead they are forced to stay with Ichigo's friend, Keigo, which sucks for Ikkaku because Keigo's sister, Mizuho, still has this crush on him from the first time. The first half of this episode is pretty much just Mizuho going crazy, doing everything in her power to make Ikkaku fall in love with her, doing his laundry. She gives him a full course meal for breakfast, barging in on him while he's taking a bath to help scrub his back. Honestly, Ikkaku, what's the problem? Yumichika is having the time of his life, by the way, just in the background chilling. Completely fed up and unable to focus on their mission, Ikkaku takes some advice from Yumichika and decides to find a wig to wear to hopefully deter any of Mizuho's attraction to him, because she has a bald fetish, you see. And this ends up working a little bit too well. Now she treats them like shit, which they end up complaining about, and this all culminates in Ikkaku and Yumichika straight up just getting kicked out. Later that night, though, the hollow that they were tracking suddenly shows up attacking both Keigo and his sister while they're out on a walk. And the Shinigami go to, do their job. However, Ikkaku is now having some trouble leaving his Gigai because the adhesive that Yumichika used to glue Ikkaku's wig on, to make it seem legit. This ends up being this weird spiritual glue that ends up gluing Ikkaku's Gigai to his Konopaku. Ikkaku forces his way out, that probably hurt, and he saves Mizuho from being devoured just in time. Very courtly, thanking, you see what I did there? Very courtly thanking her for all of her hospitality. What a gentleman. This is just another example of Ikkaku being one of the most underrated characters in Bleach. He's just a very proud and noble warrior, man. Even after getting taken advantage of by Mizuho for most of the episode, sometimes literally, he's still able to show gratitude for all that she did for him and Yumichika. There's this one scene where Ichigo's just roasting Ikkaku for like 5 minutes straight, and it's pretty funny.
Orihime has no idea who this man even is.
Next, number 18, Inauguration, the new captain of Squad 2. While rushing back to his post after taking a nap that lasted a little bit too long in a forest just outside the Seireitei, Lieutenant Marechio Omaida of Squad 2 inadvertently saves this kid from being attacked by a hollow after falling off of a cliff, not paying attention to where he's going, and Omaida's a pretty big guy, so that's a lot of damage. Caught up in his own hype with the kid thinking that he scared the hollow away, Omaida bigs himself up so much that he calls himself the heroic captain of Squad 2, which is when the young boy named Ryuzaburo, awestruck, invites Omaida back to his village, where he then gets showered with gifts and baddies. The next morning, in the wee hours of the morning, Omaida, realizing he never returned to his post, rushes back to the Seireitei to report to the actual captain of Squad 2, Soifon. And just when he thought he had gotten away scot-free, that's when the boys show up, Ryuzaburo and his friends. They show up to the Seireitei worried about Omaida, still wanting to give their proper thanks because he just suddenly disappeared in the middle of the night. They get in with the help of Ichigo and Yoruichi, by the way. Omaida immediately begs Ichigo and Yoruichi to go along with his story, which Yoruichi proceeds to have way too much fun with. Ikkaku, Yumichika, and Rangiku all end up getting involved. Even the captain herself, Soifon, ends up doing a bunch of chores around Seireitei, the same exact chores that she had assigned Omaida earlier on in the episode, and this is all, as you can guess, off the strength of simping for Yoruichi. A little later on in the day, the boys then overhear Ikkaku and Yumichika exposing Omaida's truth, basically just talking shit about him behind his back, and this causes Ryuzaburo to run away, feeling all confused and betrayed. The same Hollow from earlier on in the episode then shows up to attack the boy, but despite getting exposed and being scared shitless, Omaida stands on business, and he defeats the Hollow all by himself, somewhat redeeming himself. Yeah, man, I mean, this is, a PSA episode about the importance of honesty. It's a bit Saturday morning cartoonish, but it's important not to forget that Bleach is still marketed to kids. I'm sure you've seen stories like this in tons of series where, someone tells this little white lie that ends up snowballing out of control, when they're just trying to save face. It's only that, this time it involves cool Japanese spirit samurai. And then, of course, at the end, Omaida gets his proper punishment from Soifone. You gotta love it. Number 17, another Cone episode. It's been a while. The Reviving Lion. Oh my god, this episode. Absolutely fed up with being a part of Yuzu's stuffed animal collection, Cone finally sees a chance to escape his dainty captivity after Yuzu has to run to the store to get some more thread to finish stitching this skirt that she's gonna force Cone to wear. Meanwhile, on the outside, everyone's favorite talk show host Don Kanoji is just chilling outside the Kurosaki clinic with an absurdly pink limousine. I guess he has free time because his TV show has episodes taped in advance. In reality, it's because his popularity has been plummeting and he's in danger of being canceled. This all gets exposed by Karin. So he's looking to reform the Karakura Superheroes, basically the precursor to Team Karakuraizer. Again, this has an origin story we'll get to later. This is when Karin, the former Karakura Red, finds him loitering outside of her house, calls him out for getting his show canceled, and tells him off for obstructing business. And then she turns him down. Cut back to Cone, and this is when he then falls out of Yuzu's window. He falls right in front of Don Kanoji, and he immediately reveals that he's alive. At first, Kanoji starts thinking Cone is a hollow, but then he starts thinking about the bag. So his business proposal is that he wants to make Cone a mascot for the Karakura superheroes called the Karakura King, which Cone is obviously on board with, daydreaming about all of the huzz he'll get by being on television. Just as the two start getting on the same page with their new business partnership, this is when Yuzu arrives. Recognizing Kanoji from the earlier filler episode, they start doing the pose and stuff. Kanoji is telling her all about, his new recruit, his new mascot, the dollar signs, right? And I promise you, bro, I swear on everything, Cone's reaction to this, it broke me, because obviously Yuzu isn't supposed to know that Cone is alive, and now he's about to have a heart attack, and this caught me so off guard. Plus now, Kanoji is inviting Yuzu to be a part of the team under her alias of Karakura Yellow. But it's okay for now, because it doesn't immediately register in Yuzu's head that this is Cone, aka her friend Bostov. She thinks this is just a totally separate prop that Kanoji bought from the store. Things only get worse for him once Jinta, now the former Karakura Red, and Ururu, the former Karakura Violet, they end up getting caught in Kanoji's web of shenanigans as well, and man, they pit Cone through the ringer. Realizing now that he's back in the same position he started in, just a subject of everyone else's experimentation, he tries to escape once more, only now to be abducted by a hollow that resembles a centipede. The hollow doesn't want to eat Cone though. Instead, it wants to marry him. Oh, W unspoken Riz. The rest of the group see this though, except for Yuzu, who just sees Cone floating in midair and marvels at it. This hollow is extremely territorial though, so it fights to protect its new hostage boyfriend and goes to attack the completely oblivious Yuzu. This is when Karin then suddenly shows up and saves her in the nick of time. Jinta and Karin immediately start to bicker over who is the true Karakura Red. Karin really couldn't care less and just roast Jinta for still playing along. And the two of them, including Ururu and Cone against his will, they work together to successfully eliminate the hollow. Again, this episode is hilarious. Yuzu's just a chill girl, man. Whether it's a bunch of kids that want to play dress up, a hustler trying to get to his money, or a lonely incel hollow, Cone just can't catch a break here, man. And Kanoji is in rare form in this episode too. He almost gets run over by a box truck in the first 5 minutes when he's goofing off too much. Bro gotta chill. Number 16. Real World and Shinigami, the New Year special. Another New Year special. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. The original New Year special, and hey, what can I say?
The original was better.
Both of the episodes share a similar structure: silly, wacky, fun first half of the episode with a sweet and heartwarming second half. We start off in the Seireitei, where Yachiru announces the formation of the Shinigami Women's Association. They have this New Year's party exchanging gifts to celebrate the season. This is when grumpy old Captain Hitsugaya then shows up, and we're all expecting him to scold Rangiku for neglecting her duties as per the usual. But this time, the Now ain't having none of it. She feels slighted. A bunch of other Soul Reapers then pop in and give their 2 cents. This eventually snowballs into this gender war, basically, between the male and females. Yachiru then takes it upon herself to make this executive decision to settle the disagreement in a game of Karuta. Another real game, basically just a card matching game. Ikkaku's repeatedly getting his balls busted by Yachiru for being bald, with his head being used on damn near every card. Shuhei can't function, simping over Rangiku the entire time. Soifon is also simping over any mention of Yoruichi. And then Izuru, trying to be sneaky, he uses Wabisuke to cheat. And this opens the floodgates. All the Zanpakuto, all the Kido spells start coming out, and it basically turns into an all-out brawl. Then at the end, Toshiro, still utterly confused as to how he's ended up in this situation, he tells Rangiku that he was only joshing her earlier and that all he really wanted to do was just to wish his lieutenant a happy new year. Aww. On to the world of the living now, and this one damn near brought a tear to my eye, man. Basically, Orihime has nothing to do on New Year's Eve because all of her friends are busy with their families. Orihime's family, of course, not being around, all being victims of hollows. She's feeling quite lonely about it. That is until Rukia and Renji arrive, doing their final rounds of the year in Karakura Town. They decide to bring her along to Urahara shop for the day to help cheer her up, hopefully. All at Renji's expense. Poor Renji. Renji, is that blackface? Later that night, she and Rukia then decide to head to the temple to give their prayers, enjoying all the New Year's festivities, only for it to be completely barren when they get there. Just a couple minutes late to the party, you hate to see it. This is when Ichigo, Uryu, and Chad all surprise her by showing up and showing Orihime that they didn't forget about her. Again, there's no insane battles here, nothing like that. This is just peak slice of life. The Shinigami gender war is hysterical, and I'm literally making this video during the holidays, so it does hit a little bit different for me personally, talking to you from December. Ultimately, this whole episode is just friends hanging out. Also, I don't really comment on the skits at the end of the episode, but here in this one, you know, there's no way they're not fucking, right?
Number 15, top 15, let us see it. It's Toshiro Hitsugaya's holiday. I don't care what King of Lightning says, man. And that's my boy. Toshiro Hitsugaya is one of the best characters in Bleach. Not necessarily my favorite captain, but easily top 5. Easily the most well-rounded out of the 13 of them. In this episode, Toshiro is taking his holiday, as he should. I didn't even know Shinigami got PTO. And this is tough for Rangiku, but that's her problem. But for Toshiro, it gives him a chance to go back to the human world and play soccer with his good pal Karin. Again. This relationship will be explained later. They both go to visit this elderly lady named Haru, who looked after Toshiro back in the day when he was still just a rookie Soul Reaper on his first deployment in the world of the living. While there, he and Karin discover this plus spirit named Yosuke still lingering around. They find a bunch of spirits lingering around, actually. Toshiro explains that, you know, he's aware of this, but I guess he has his eye on it. It's kind of weird logic because he's not there all the time and also is only here for a couple days. And like, why does Haru need spirits around her? Why can't she just get a pet or something? But Yosuke in particular, his thing is that he refuses to pass on because he wants to see the snow. Toshiro does take note though of how long Yosuke has been there and finds it strange that he hasn't turned into a hollow already. He does though, eventually, shortly after Haru, the old lady, passes out, and this is when it gets revealed that she was actually the one keeping Yosuke from transforming, using her own Ryatsu to kind of suppress it. So she faints, and unfortunately Toshiro, on his off day, has to battle Yosuke gone berserk. After a little bit of internal struggle, not wanting to take Haru's favorite godchild away from her, she actually uses the last of her energy to help restrain Yosuke enough for Toshiro to finally finish him off. And yeah, at the end of the episode, Yosuke reverts back to his normal plus form, and they all spend the last moments with him watching the snowfall, because it's been cloudy in the background the entire episode as well. After all said and done, Karin promises to come back and visit the old lady because she's actually alive and lives in Karakura Town. And then Toshiro goes back to the Soul Society to spend the rest of his vacation time with his actual grandmother. Yeah, man, again, episodes like these is why I think Toshiro was so cool. Overall, he's a chill guy, but he ain't a pushover. He damn sure ain't no slacker. He plays it by the book, but he's also willing to bend a couple of rules if it fits the situation. On the surface, he might seem incredibly straight-laced, but down deep in his core, he's actually pretty down to earth. All right, that's enough. That's enough. There will be more glazing when we get to the Diamond Dust movie, but for now, yeah, I just really enjoy this badass buddy cop duo of Toshiro and Karin. Number 14. Number 14. It's a classic. Summer Sea Swimsuit Festival. It's the beach episode, boys. Every anime gets one. Just for the way they draw Rangiku here, you knew it had to rank high. So the Shinigami Women's Association is back again, and they're taking a trip to the living world to visit the beach because Byakuya destroyed their secret hidden pool, which was hidden on the Kuchiki estate back in the Soul Society. In this episode, yeah, I mean, it's nothing but fan service right out the gate. Full body upward panning shots of everybody in swimsuits. Hold your noses, boys. Honestly, I think the only series that could rival Bleach in the baddie department is probably Fairy Tail, but even then, like, Bleach is peak, man. Bleach, yo, come on. Ooh, look at it! Look at it! Look at it! Look at it! Anyways, enough simping over fictional women. Along with all the girls, Ichigo, Renji, Ikkaku, Ukitake, and co-third seat Centauro are also there because, well, why not? And the girls also invite Byakuya too as reparations for building the pool on his property without his permission. Immediately, Ukitake faints because of the heat, so for most of the episode, he's just off in the background being tended to by Kiyone and Centauro, while everyone else competes in the first annual beach art competition to build the best sand sculpture, with Unohana being the judge. Can something be annual if it's only ever happened once? Everyone splits into groups and they all get to work. Even Squad 13 still finds a way to compete when Centauro builds this sand coffin. No, not that one. For Ukitake to rest in an ice bath in. Believe it or not, they actually end up winning off of this, and this has everyone all hot and bothered. Before they can protest the decision, though, I mean, well, first of all, what could they really do? This is Unohana we're talking about. Giant watermelon monster emerges from the ocean and starts attacking the group. Rule 34? You know what to do. Assuming it to be a hollow, everyone immediately springs into action, only to realize that they all left their Zanpakuto behind. Everyone, that is, except for Renji, who's never caught lacking. That's another L for Renji. Nemu somehow knows everything about this creature already and explains that only physical attacks can damage it. So Kido and all Reishi-based attacks are off the table, which Chad and Uryu find out the hard way. And of course, Ichigo doesn't have his substitute Shinigami badge either. Just when all seems lost, that's when Yoruichi and Soifone return, and they take out the giant watermelon monster with ease using Hakuda. Ukitake then wakes back up, and he reveals that this was all just an elaborate game created by him, Byakuya, Unohana, in the Science and Research Department, and then 17 more melon monsters show up, and then boom, ending credits. Brilliant. Byakuya is taking the sand sculpting contest super seriously. Rukia the entire time is just trying to follow in her brother's footsteps, which is cute. Then now gets repeatedly flamed on by Rangiku for having a totally regular chest size, to be fair. Orihime, Chad, and Uryu are working this part-time job at a shack on the beach. Toshiro is also there, just chilling, literally. Providing the ice is great. And again, man, the swimsuits are peak. Number 13. I wonder if it's about Squad 13. It's not, because it's the man who risks his life in the 11th Division. Just like that Kendo story a little while back with Ikkaku, it's manly as hell. Basically, it's this story about a former Soul Reaper turned errand boy reclaiming his honor. While getting some sparring done with Renji, Ichigo gets served some tea by a very nice man named Seizo Harugasaki, who explains to Ichigo that the reason he keeps losing these sparring matches is because fighting isn't all about the amount of spiritual energy you have, and that Kenjutsu, actual sword skills, are just as important. Curious as to how such a mild-mannered person ended up in the Black Air Force Energy 11th Division, he starts asking around about the guy, which is when Yumichika then gives us Seizo's backstory. A former seated officer of the Gote 13, rival to Ikkaku that pretty much lost all of his spiritual energy taking a bullet for Ikkaku in a hollow attack a while ago. After finding out about this, Ichigo confronts Seizo about his new docile life, to which Seizo responds meagerly that, he's resigned to the fact that he'll be discharged from the court guard squads in a few days, and that his days of being a Soul Reaper are well and truly behind him. Suddenly, though, this is when a wave of hollows attack, and a bunch of the 11th Division goes to handle it, only to be overwhelmed because Kenpachi and Yachiru are away, and the only Soul Reaper there that isn't absolute fodder is Ikkaku. After having no other choice, watching everyone getting taken out one by one, Seizo finally musters up the confidence to pick up the sword again and fight, and he goes to defend all of the men that were literally just making fun of him for being a washed-up butler now. Once again, standing side by side with his old rival Ikkaku, the two of them eliminate all the remaining hollows, and Seizo at the end of the episode is given this hero send-off by the entire 11th Division.
on his final day. Absolutely phenomenal. Amazing motivation for anybody that feels like, I don't know, like their prime might be behind them. Maybe you once had a dream that you might have given up for one reason or another and now feel like it might be too late to chase it. It's never too late. Bro is basically Kafka from Kaiju number 8. It's not exactly clear when this is happening on the Bleach timeline, but for us watching at least, this is a part of all that post-Aizen filler, right? So it at least gives us the dramatic irony of knowing that Ichigo will lose his powers at some point. And that in a lot of ways, when he's talking to Seizo in this episode, he's actually talking to himself. This episode really struck a chord with me, man. By the end of it, I was standing on my feet in salute of this absolutely random man that I met today and will probably never see again. So as far as I'm concerned, hey, that's mission accomplished. Oh man. Number 12 is a special one. It's Hitsugaya, Karin, and the soccer ball. Not only does it give more screen time for a tertiary level character like Karin, but it also takes it even a step further, forging bonds between characters that we never really expected to happen.
The Bleach anime, man, expands on these characters so much. Shuhei's crush on Rangiku, Shuhei and Izuru's whole bromance, the Karakuraizers, and now this. I already spoke about the friendship between Toshiro and Karin. This is basically how they meet. Karin and her friends are about to start practicing. This is when their usual field gets stolen from them by a bunch of high schoolers. So Karin, as fiery as ever, she wants to settle it in a soccer game where the losers have to find a new spot to practice. The rest of her team recognizes just how in over their heads they are playing against the older kids. They try to get her to recruit her older brother Ichigo. Ichigo, however, is off training with the Visors. But nobody knows this, and even if she did, she probably still wouldn't tell them that. So Karin simply says that Ichigo is away on a trip. This is when on their way home, though, they all end up running into Hitsugaya. Karin actually remembers him from earlier on in the episode, this mysterious kid that saved her soccer ball from rolling into oncoming traffic. Toshiro's just on standby monitoring for hollow activity, which is when they ask him to join the soccer team and he immediately declines. So she tries again the next day, but also to no avail. Another hollow appears, and this is when Toshiro discovers that Karin can actually sense spirits. She actually tries to stop him from going towards it in this wonderful moment of irony, completely unaware that he's not only a soul reaper, but a captain of an entire platoon. This annoys the hell out of Toshiro, but it's okay because someone else is taking care of the hollow. It probably was Ikkaku. And yeah, even after all this, he's still uninterested in the soccer game, but he's lying to himself because the next day he shows up to watch Karin's team practice off in the distance. The day of the big game then finally arrives, and of course, Toshiro doesn't show up. Not only does Karin's team end up getting steamrolled 0-4, but Karin herself also gets injured in the process. Just when all seems lost, with the only somewhat decent player on their team now stuck on the sidelines, this is when the man of the hour finally appears. Pits the whole team on his back, ties the game by himself, and lets Karin score the winning goal in the end. This is when, everybody say it with me now, this is when a hollow attacks. Toshiro reveals his Shinigami form to Karin, and he protects her and all of her friends from being destroyed. Again, this is just slice of life, but I just love these character interactions, man. We get introduced to Toshiro's underlying passion for soccer, and I know what you're thinking, but this isn't even a romance type of thing. And then at the end, all the way at the end, Karin asks him where Ichigo is, to which Toshiro responds that he doesn't know either. Nobody knows. But he tells her that she should stop worrying. It's great, man. It's great. Like, half of this episode is a soccer game. It's basically Bleach Blue Lock. Bleach Lock. Number 11. It's the Sealed Sword Frenzy. Fuck all that sweet shit, man. This right here, nah, this go hard. Baishin is basically Bleach's Broly. Like he's just on one for the whole episode. On demon time the entire time. So Ichigo, Rukia, and Kon are busy doing absolutely nothing, which is when Renji then shows up on an urgent mission. They go to a restaurant to talk about it, and in the middle of explaining, that's when Baishin suddenly arrives, and he attacks Karakura Town in a frenzy. Let's see what I did there. Baishin, how do I say it? He's a former Soul Reaper that crashed out, basically. Going on this bloodlusted rampage one day, managing to kill over 63 seated officers, there's even a couple lieutenants in there, becoming so unstoppable that it took 6 captains to merely seal him. Not defeat him, just seal him within a statue, and even then, a few of them still had to give up their lives to do so. Baishin's power was still growing though, and it ended up becoming so powerful, he was able to finally break out of his seal 400 years later, and now is looking to continue his rampage. Ichigo is in the area where he first appears, and he tries to confront him, but he only ends up getting his Ryatsu stolen from him.
Tragic. So later on in the OVA, they pull up on Gaiden again. This time with Hitsugaya, Shunsui, Ukitake, Soifone, and Yoruichi there as backup. Gaiden still overwhelms them with his new sword monster, fully released monster form, but Ichigo finally puts him down with his Bankai. Tensa Zangetsu. It's pretty straightforward, man. It's just one big fight. Gaiden is a beast, man. The Brock Lesnar of Bleach. It gets revealed at the end that the whole entire reason why he was so cracked was because he was actually fused with his Zanpakuto the entire time. Something that took Aizen having to merge with the Hueco and Ichigo training in the Dangai for 2,000 hours to achieve. And that fully released monster form was actually his Bankai.
The only negatives I guess I have here is that this story probably could have used a little bit more room to breathe. Like, this could have easily been a movie or something. And it's absolutely criminal that Kenpachi didn't get to fight this guy, but I guess we all gotta blame Yachiru for that. But yeah, nah, this thing is freaking awesome. And Kubo has a hand in it as well, so you know, I definitely check this out if you haven't already. Number 10. Top 10. Oh wow. Very fitting, actually. Trust me, I did not plan this. Is Bleach Movie 2. The DiamondDust Rebellion. The first movie of the list, so that right there should tell you how good the Bleach movies are. Let the glazing begin. So basically, Toshiro, Rangiku, and the entire 10th Division are being framed for staging an inside heist of this royal artifact called the Owing, after their transport caravan was suddenly ambushed at the beginning of the film, with the only evidence being left behind as to who could have done it being traces of Hyorin Maru being left behind in the assault. Toshiro goes AWOL, taking matters into his own hands, and he goes to track down the real culprit, the real one behind it all, Sojiro Kusaka, old friend of Toshiro that trained with him back in the day in the Shino Academy. They actually ended up manifesting the same exact Zanpakuto. Twin Hyorin Maru. Two Soul Reapers are not allowed to have the same Zanpakuto, so in the latest example of your average Central 46L, they order Hitsugaya and Kusaka as kids to fight to the death for the right to wield Hyorin Maru. Toshiro refuses to fight, but Kusaka, trembling with anxiety and not really knowing what to do, he raises his sword at him, which gets him surrounded by the Omitsukido faster than you can say Bankai. This was merely just a test to see who would crack first. Kusaka then gets executed, and his body gets dumped in the middle of the endless sands of Hueco Mundo. Back in the present now, and Ichigo is providing some asylum for Toshiro, only for the captain to immediately try and escape, refusing to answer any of Ichigo's questions. This is when Kusaka's lackeys show up, a duo of female Arankar named Yin and Yang that he recruited in Hueco Mundo while he was being reborn as a hollow. They attack the both of them, and Toshiro uses this as his chance to escape. And then the bulk of the movie is just Hitsugaya on the run from the rest of the Gotei 13. Kusaka back and forth between the Soul Society and the human world, looking for Toshiro that he can use him and the other half of Hyorin Maru to cut the Owing in half to release its powers and use said powers to become the new Soul King, basically. The team of Shunsui, Nanao, and Mayuri is looking into Hitsugaya's records to try and get to the bottom of the situation. And of course, Ichigo and his friends are caught in the middle of everything, still refusing to see Toshiro as a traitor. Hitsugaya and Kusaka inevitably meet, which is when Kusaka then uses the dimension warping powers of the Owing to transport them smack dab in the middle of the Seireitei on Sokyoku Hill. And after this, all hell breaks loose now that Toshiro's finally returned. Ichigo eventually gets a spirit uber from Kisuke, and he has this very aggressive heart-to-heart with Toshiro. Kusaka transforms into this giant ice dragon, and the entire Gotei basically work together to take him down, with Hitsugaya providing the final blow. Great movie, not my favorite, but we all know I'm a big Toshiro guy. He's pretty much Bleach's Kakashi in this movie, and Kusaka is like his Obito. I really appreciate Ichigo's role in all of this. Being able to understand how it feels to lose someone very important to you, coping with this grief by closing yourself off to others and internalizing everything. Not only can you stress yourself out, but you're also shutting everybody out that actually cares about you and wants to help. Uryu gets this one extremely satisfying scene where he wipes out like hundreds of hollows using so many arrows, it's gorgeous. In the final battle, go crazy. One thing I will say though is that I feel like Rangiku could have, and quite frankly should have, had a much larger presence in this movie, being the lieutenant after all, and also the oftentimes very shrewd Toshiro suddenly turning his back on the Gotei 13 is a bit irrational, but the emotional themes here are still very strong. And at the end of the day, my boy Toshiro got the whole movie to himself. You love to see it. Number 9. Miracle, the mysterious new hero. This is the origin of the Karakura superheroes, and actually my introduction to Don Kannoji, because back in the day, all I saw was the Soul Society arc. I didn't really see everything before that. This episode takes place right in the middle of the Soul Society arc because fuck your plot. Here we cut back to the human world. Karin and Yuzu discover this random crop circle that has everyone's attention. Out of nowhere, this is when this mysterious small tan cat falls out the sky and onto Yuzu's face. Obviously, she wants to keep it forever. Put a pause on that. Cut over to the Urahara shop. Here we have Jinta and Ururu doing regular chores, where Ururu swats away a bunch of tiny level 1 hollows and actually acknowledges an increase in disturbances recently. Ooh, I wonder why. And what the hell is Jinta doing? Cut back to the Kurosakis. Yuzu is named the cat Raku because the Japanese word for camel is Rakuda, and the tannish color of it kind of reminds her of one. This is when they arrive back home at the clinic and find once again an absurdly pink limousine parked outside their house.
You need to slow this motherfucker down. You understand? I almost spilled my yak on this $200 suit, nigga.
Out pops Don Kannoji asking for Ichigo, but as we know, Ichigo is currently in the Seireitei trying to save Rukia. All of Kannoji's theatrics and catchphrases have Yuzu extremely delighted. Can't say the same for Karin though. This is when another one of those level 1 mini hollows attack, and it's looking bad for Kannoji, to Karin's complete and utter apathy. That is until Jinta and Ururu arrive to inform them that the cat is actually a spirit with a Rei Ryoku that's attracting all of these hollows, and they need to get rid of it. To which Yuzu furiously protests. Kannoji's in the background cooking up a master plan to create the ultimate team of superpowered children called the Karakura Superheroes. Karin and Jinta immediately turns him down. That is until Kannoji mentions a Karakura superhero television show. And driven by the allure of clout, they start playing along, but argue over who gets to be the main character, Karakura Red. Meanwhile, the extremely wholesome team of Ururu and Yuzu, they try looking for Kisuke to help, but I guess he went on break or something. He's not around. Then they get attacked by hollows, and eventually on a roof, Yuzu gets backed into a corner. However, this is when it turns out that Raku, the cat, actually has powers. Basically a lit Leo in disguise, and it saves Yuzu's life. It's actually kind of cool. It fights against this giant hollow that's all of the mini hollows fused together, and then Ururu finishes it off with her joint rocket. You can't tell me it doesn't look like a joint. At the end, the big twist is that Yuzu actually knew all along that the cat was a spirit, because she remembers first meeting it when it was alive, before it got tragically run over by a car. That's the second instance of vehicular homicide on an animal in Bleach. Just as everything is starting to fall into place for Kannoji, with Ururu now calling herself Karakura Pink, joining the team, Kannoji declares himself Karakura Gold, the leader of the group. And Jinta and Karin have had enough. Yeah. Peak slice of life, bro. It makes too much sense to not have an episode where all the kids from Karakura Town interact with one another. Way to go, Yuzu, for stringing everybody along. Hey, she's not as naive as you might think. And then, yo, it's this one scene where Kannoji literally runs away with Ishin's kids right in front of his face, and that's kind of wild. Famous or not, you just gonna let him abduct your kids like that, bro? Couldn't be me. On to number 8. Back to the movies. It's movie 1, Memories of Nobody. Yes, I am aware that this is technically canon because it's referenced during the war arc. However, for about a decade, it was only a movie. So I think I'll just ignore that for now. While out one day on their regular patrol, Ichigo and Rukia sense an influx of a large and intense Ryatsu. When they go to check it out, they get greeted by a mass of white figures with pointy heads. Unable to perform a Konso on them, Ichigo and Rukia are left completely mystified, which is when this brand new Soul Reaper arrives, complete with fancy Zanpakuto that can create tornadoes, and she wipes out the horde of weird white ghosts. Rukia demands to know what her credentials are, to which the girl, named Senna, responds that she doesn't know what division she belongs to, and that it actually doesn't even matter, before running off laughing. Then, coincidentally, for some reason, Rukia's lost contact with the Soul Society on her Denrei Shinki phone, so she prepares to head back to see what's going on, but tells Ichigo to not let Senna out of his sight. Meanwhile, in the Seireitei, also coincidentally, Ikkaku notices this hole opening up in the sky, showing a reflection of the human world. We'll get back to that in a moment. Back to Ichigo. While in the middle of chasing down Senna, he runs into Lieutenant Ranagiku and Captain Hitsugaya, investigating the current events, which is when they all head to Urahara's shop to deliberate. Urahara then explains everything, that the ghosts that Ichigo and Rukia ran into earlier are actually souls that have been separated from their memories called blanks. He continues to explain where they came from. Sometimes in a Dangai while passing on, accidents happen, it's normal. But eventually, once enough of these separated, memoryless souls gather, an entirely new dimensional space is created created, called the Valley of Screams, which is where the memories and the souls separate. This creates an entirely new entity, an amalgamation of all of the memories. This is called the Shinenju. Again, Urahara explains that this is a very normal occurrence, but this one is unusual. The valley has grown so big that it's directly connected the human world and the Soul Society, and that they need to find the Shinenju before the valley collapses in on itself and sends both realms crashing into each other. Spoiler alert, obviously Senna is the Shinenju, but completely unaware of it because of all of the conflicting memories in her head. Enter the Dark Ones. Exiled members of the Ryo Doji clan from 1,000 years ago, led by a man named Ganryu. They've all been living in the Dangai ever since, plotting their revenge on the Soul Society. Ganryu kidnaps Senna, bringing her back to the Valley of Screams to expedite the valley's collapse. Ichigo arrives in the nick of time to save her, and everyone lives happily ever after. Psych! The worlds are still at risk of colliding, and at the very end, Senna then sacrifices herself to prevent complete and total annihilation. Right off the bat, Senna is a terrific character. Very whimsical, very likable. The Dark Ones all are cool as hell. I'm not gonna lie though, they do kind of come off as diet bounce. That final scene, man. Oh man, my heart. When she asked Ichigo to take her to see her gravestone in her final moments so she can remember when she was alive, but on the gravestone is actually somebody else's name because she never actually existed, and then Ichigo lies about it to, you know, make her feel good because she can't see it anyways, she's fading away. It brings a tear to my eye every time I watch this movie, man. And then after she dies, everybody apart from Ichigo forgets about her entire existence. Another phenomenal movie, but this one having, you know, that bittersweet ending, that's kind of why I put it above the Toshiro movie. On to number 7. What we got? It's the Forest of the Menos. Everything about this is so cool. A lost, wandering Shinigami thugging it out in the bowels of Hueco Mundo. The sole survivor of this group of Shinigami, known for fighting as a unit that got lured into Hueco Mundo, fighting a bunch of hollows a long time ago, and then ended up getting all but wiped out. The Shinigami's name is Ashido, and this is basically 3 episodes about the Orihime rescue team getting lost in the Forest of the Menos, and Ashido, the cool edgelord Soul Reaper, helping them escape. The Forest of the Menos being this giant cave under the sand where all of the regular hollows live, hiding from the Arrancar on the surface. This was all confirmed to, or at least supposed to be in the manga, but was cut by Kubo because of time constraints. So again, another one that's not technically filler, but we're just splitting hairs at this point. This all happens right before Ichigo and the crew storm Las Noches. In the manga, they fight the giant sand monster Runuganga once, Rukia one-shots him, and they go on about their day. But here in the anime, Runuganga rises up again, and almost like quicksand, drags our heroes down to the forest, with Rukia getting separated from the rest of the group. This is when Rukia meets Ashido wearing a gazelle skull as a mask, in the midst of fighting off a bunch of random Gillians and Adhuchas. He's acting all cool and mysterious at first, definitely a man of few words, but eventually he does open up to Rukia, and explaining that the skull mask he was wearing used to be a hollow's face, and got sliced off by one of his teammates in their final stand before he died, so he wears it as a sign of respect. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ichigo, Uryu, Renji, and Chad are trying to find their own way out of the forest, while also searching for Rukia and fighting against a bunch of hollows themselves. Also elsewhere, Nell, Pesce, and Dondachaka have made themselves deities in the eyes of the hollows, basically, with everybody taking a knee to Nell for being one of Aizen's Arrancar, secretly the number 3 Espada at that. The 3 groups eventually reunite, and they narrowly escape with Ashido's assistance. And yet again, man, Ashido, this man is so cool. Really that edgy pretty boy archetype, mentally scarred from trauma. His mission is cool, on a solo mission to help protect the human world by fighting thousands upon thousands of hollows by himself for hundreds of years in the shadows. After he meets Rukia, it gets kinda depressing, you know, when she tells him that his efforts hasn't really changed a thing in the outside world. And then the Nell, Pesce, Dondachaka B-plot is just great comic relief. I love this arc, man. Just a very well-rounded filler arc. It has a little bit of everything, and then it doesn't even overstay its welcome. Number 6. My voice is starting to go. It's the 4th Bleach movie, Hellverse. The Hellverse movie. Ah man, the power scaling pioneers used to ride this baby for miles. Basically, Yuzu gets abducted and brought to hell by the guy, Shuren, and his goons that we talked about in that earlier episode, you know, the one that humbled the Espada. The team of Ichigo, Rukia, Renji, Uryu, and this guy named Kokuto, who showed up out of nowhere at the beginning of the movie to save Karin from also getting kidnapped, they go into hell to rescue Ichigo's sister before she dies by just being in hell's environment, which can turn them into a Togabito just by being there for too long. Fast forward a little bit, Kokuto Yamato then betrays Ichigo. Spoiler alert, he forces out and uses Ichigo's Vasto Lorde transformation to break open the gates of hell to free him until it's backwards. In the midst of the chaos, Renji uses this special Kido spell given to him by Yamamoto to send Ichigo back to the human world, but now Ichigo has to go to hell again to rescue his friends from Kokuto. And then yeah, that's basically the Cliff Notes version. First off, the animation in this movie is peak. As soon as I saw the redone version of Ichigo and Ukiyora's fight at the beginning, I knew I was going to be in for a treat, visually speaking. Hell looks amazing as well. One of the main complaints I've always had personally with Bleach, comparing it to the rest of the big three, is that it's always kind of lacked that grand sense of adventure, right? Here we spend the entire movie exploring each level of hell. A brand spanking new realm outside of the main three worlds that we've known about ever since the Shrieker incident way back at the beginning of the story, but never actually explored until now. So even just that hooks me into the movie so much. And then you have Kokuto, grief-stricken by the loss of his sister a long time ago. All he wanted to do during his life was avenge her death, which ended up getting him condemned to hell for all of eternity just for getting his lick back on her killers. He's pretty much an evil Ichigo. He wants to use Ichigo to break open the gates of hell so that he can make every human experience the same suffering that he did. A great antagonist. He has a very tragic backstory that makes you sympathize for him. He ends up being so much of a threat to the balance of the entire cosmos that hell itself lends power to Ichigo to finally put an end to Kokuto's evil plan. The whole middle section of the movie, man, this really caught me off guard. When Ichigo gets sent back home after the whole Vasto Lorde situation, only to then have to deal with the guilt and the burden of being responsible for his friends' capture, as well as also being hesitant about going back to save them because he might lose control of his hollow powers once again. Luckily though, Ichigo has Byakuya and Orihime. They both give Ichigo their encouragement to help him get back on his horse and fight. Shuren and his goons, despite being relevant for only like half the movie, they have some incredible battles. One of them is literally Muchi Muchi from Dragon Ball GT, but actually useful. My only issue here is that I feel like the pacing is just a little bit fast. Like this could have easily been a 2-hour movie. They could have spent a little bit more time with Ichigo being depressed in the human world. But besides that, yeah, I think it's obvious why this movie is so popular. Some of y'all are probably mad that this isn't at the top for me. Spicy. All right, boys. Oh, I gotta stretch. Oh. Damn. Number 5. I really be yapping, bro. Like, I wrote a whole page. It's the Kasumioji Conspiracy. This story is Bleach's maiden voyage into the world of widescreen, TV anime at least. Back when everything was starting to make that transition during the high definition craze of 2008, this arc is the tale of two stories. On one hand, in the Soul Society, we have the story of Squad 3 getting a new captain in place of Gin, named Shusuke Amagai, as well as a brand new seated officer named Nakoto Kibune, and everybody in the division is just giving them the cold shoulder right off the bat. On the other hand, we have this estranged heir to a royal family, Mauricio, seeking asylum in the human world because she's being targeted by a bunch of assassins. Obviously, she meets Ichigo where he then agrees to be her bodyguard, and they then embark on a mission to get her back in power. And it gets pretty messy. There's this old guy, Kumoi, who's behind the whole thing, a steward for the family for generations, taking his shot at the top now that Mauricio's father, the former head of the family, is dead, putting together this team of assassins, forging these evil and parasitic Zanpakuto equivalents called Bakoto that feeds off the user's Ryatsu, arranging a purely political marriage between Mauricio and this kid named Shu, who we talked about before, who actually has a crush on Mauricio but is ultimately just being used as a pawn in Kumoi's game. All of this is all so Kumoi can proceed with his much larger plan, controlling every noble clan in the Soul Society. Put that on hold for now. Back to Squad 3. Of course, anybody could probably assume that, you know, Kibune was probably the traitor. I mean, just look at him. But Amagai too? Nah, that got me. And his story goes even deeper than the Kasumioji. He has this whole grudge against Yamamoto for killing his dad, when back in the day, in reality, his dad was a loyal pupil of Yamamoto that took it upon himself to spy on what the Kasumioji were doing with the Bakoto, only to end up as this walking science experiment, fully consumed by the evil energy of the Bakoto, where Yamato then had no other choice but to put his #1 student down himself. The wedding ends up being a huge event in the arc that almost incites an entire civil war in the Seireitei, because Ichigo is over here thought to be meddling with royal affairs that have nothing to do with him. Whole time, nobody knows about the Bakoto or about Mauricio being held hostage with a doppelganger in her place. I really love Izuru Nikita's presence in this whole arc. He, of course, plays a major role in exposing Kibune as a collaborator of Kumoi. The final battle against Ichigo was really cool. Amagai basically fighting with two weapons, a Zanpakuto and a Bakoto. Oh man, I haven't even talked about that one episode where Ichigo's fighting against one of the assassins, Hanza, who puts him in this genjutsu, more or less, where he gets attacked by this vindictive and resentful version of his mother. There's a lot to enjoy about this arc, man. In real time, I'm sure it was frustrating. It took like 6 months, but I binged this arc and the pacing wasn't that bad for me. My only real complaint here is that a lot of people call this arc the Shusuke Amagai arc, but I'm gonna be honest, besides the first episode and like the last couple episodes, Amagai is kind of a background character for the majority of this. Like, even when we cut back to see what's going on in Squad 3, I feel like Kira and Kibune get way more screen time than Amagai. Number four. Oh, I love this one. It's Bleach Movie 3, Fade to Black. My favorite Bleach movie. I love an amnesia storyline. Kisuke pulls up in this movie and he rarely fights, even in the main story. So basically, Mayuri Kyosuchi has this accident in his lab after being suddenly attacked by these two mysterious figures. In an act of desperation to cover his ass, he stabs Ashisogi Jizo into his computer to try and mitigate the leakage in Ryatsu. But it's too late. This enormously dense cloud of reishi forms, and it produces these giant reishi snakes, I guess, that look like they're made of jizz, to be honest. In the midst of all the commotion, the two mysterious people, they find and abduct Rukia. The guy slashes Rukia with his cool-looking scythe, and it erases her memories. Mayuri was sliced as well, so he then proceeds to forget everything that just happened in his lab. The two unnamed assailants are this brother and sister duo that have returned to put an end to Rukia's days as a Soul Reaper, so that she can live with them instead, as a family. And most importantly, finally give them names, which she promised to give them a long time ago. Everyone that Rukia has ever known completely forgets about her existence. Everyone, that is, except for Kon. MVP! Because he's just a mod soul. And then Ichigo as well, after Kon helps jog his memory. And then yeah, the entire memory is just Ichigo and Kon trying to get Rukia back. On paper, it sounds kind of mid, but trust me, man. Trust me. This movie is underrated as fuck. Ichigo has this incredibly fascinating confrontation with Byakuya at some point in the movie, who's also lost all memory of Rukia. Ichigo tries bringing up Hisana to get him to remember, only to be chased out of the estate because nobody remembers him either by proxy because he, you know, his whole introduction was tied to Rukia. There's a ton of Soul Society arc callbacks here, actually. Ichigo and Renji have a whole rematch and everything. Urahara, again, he has a huge presence in this movie, being the one to ultimately crack the case, pulling up in his old captain's howdy as a jab at Mayuri, I guess, for having to clean up his mess. There's a ton of memory manipulation shit going on here, man. Everybody forgetting Rukia, Mayuri getting slashed and losing his memory of the incident, but not being forgotten completely because he has this, I guess, OneDrive backup of his brain that he keeps after every experiment. And this kind of keeps his presence alive in everyone's minds, at least up until the point where the incident happened. Rukia being unable to remember the brother and sister duo because they gave up their entire existence and memory of them, in Rukia's mind at least, to protect her from this parasitic, memory-altering hollow. At the root of all of this, by the way, and this is their origin story. This movie can be kind of confusing at times, I'm not gonna lie. But it's okay, because we have this giant expository dump from Urahara in the third act of the film to make it even more confusing. The brother and sister ultimately decide to risk it all, erasing all of Rukia's memories, even the faint ones that she has of them, by merging with her and creating this evil, dark Rukia that now Ichigo and Byakuya have to work together to take down. And it's kind of cool. And then, once the dust is finally settled after the big final battle, the movie still ends tragically, with Rukia bawling her eyes out over just now being able to remember everything about the siblings moments before they die, which is when she finally gives them their names, Homura and Shizuku. And then, yeah, of course, there's still a bunch of other things I haven't even talked about yet. Kenpachi gets his most epic introduction yet, real Vegeta style from the Android 13 movie, rising out of a beacon of Ryatsu laughing maniacally over being able to finally cut something. Kon is playing therapist for Ichigo, who's beating himself up after being unable to rescue Rukia in their first meeting halfway through the film. That's my goat, man. And again, you still got the whole reason, the actual reason why Homura and Shizuku hate Soul Reapers. Renji's role in all of this, I will never not love just how dense all of these Bleach movies are, man. It's about time somebody finally gave Fade to Black its proper flowers. Number 3, Zanpakuto Unknown Tales Part 1. the Zanpakuto Rebellion. I constantly juggle this and the next two picks on which is my favorite filler. Even now, I'm still not completely confident in my decision-making abilities. So all of a sudden, everybody Zanpakuto mysteriously stops listening to them. This is when each squad then receives a summon from Head Captain Yamamoto to meet on Sokyoku Hill and address the situation. However, instead of Old Man Gen Ryusai, the Soul Reapers are instead greeted by a mysterious man named Muramasa, who kind of looks like Crollo from Hunter x Hunter, but just with inverted colors. It gets revealed that the head captain has actually been sealed. Immediately, the Gotei choose violence, Komamura specifically. This is when everyone Zanpakuto instead manifests as actual people, and alongside Muramasa, they all declare war on the Soul Reapers. Rukia escapes to the world of the living only to be followed by her renegade Zanpakuto Sodeno Shirayuki, who is then forced to retreat once Ichigo arrives as backup. This is when everything gets explained to him. However, Rukia, worried sick about Byakuya after witnessing him seemingly die at the hands of Senbon Sakura, she doesn't stay long and rushes back to the Seireitei in the middle of the night. Ichigo then, and Yoruichi, who was already investigating the situation, her and Urahara really be on it for real, they chase after Rukia, and before long, Ichigo finds himself confronting Muramasa, who takes a keen interest in not only Zangetsu, but Ichigo's hollow powers as a whole. After a bit of an internal struggle, Ichigo and his inner hollow force Muramasa to retreat. This is when it's revealed that Muramasa is able to infiltrate a Shinigami's inner world, and he's able to manipulate the stability and the connection between them and their Zanpakuto spirits, effectively brainwashing them. While all this is going on, not only are we dealing with everybody fighting their Zanpakuto, being careful not to do irreparable damage, as if someone other than their rightful Soul Reaper kills them, they would become completely unusable forever. We also have to address the Byakuya situation, seemingly betraying everybody to work with Muramasa. But it gets even deeper than that. Turns out Muramasa never actually sealed Yamamoto. Instead, Yamamoto simply placed a barrier on himself to prevent Muramasa from obtaining Ryujin Jaka, which Ichigo was then tricked into breaking, thinking that he was saving him. This was always Muramasa's ultimate goal, to use the power of Ryujin Jaka to revive the long since sealed away Shinigami Koga Kuchiki, Muramasa's wielder, because he himself, all along, was just a Zanpakuto. But plot twist, another one, Koga actually resents Muramasa because he didn't help prevent him from being sealed in the first place, when in all reality, back 100 years ago or whatever, Koga's voice had stopped reaching the Zanpakuto because he was so disconnected and abusive towards it for a bunch of other political reasons involving the former head of the Kuchi clan that we don't really have the time to get into right now. But the flashback is fire, you should definitely watch it. This is then when Byakuya shows up. Current head of the Kuchiki clan, he only seemingly sided with Muramasa to gain intel on his plan and to handle it himself. This being his responsibility as head of the clan, basically pulling a Toshiro from the DiamondDust movie. Byakuya then wages war with the dried out, roided up shell of what Koga used to be, and Ichigo and his friends handle Muramasa in the background, who's now lost control of all of the hollows that he's been absorbing all this time to keep him alive. All so he could revive Koga, who immediately cast him aside. Oh yeah, and then Kurosuchi fixed all the other Zanpakuto brainwashing, so then all the other Soul Reapers pull up for backup. Whew, that was a lot. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dislike about this arc if you think about it too much, but nah, it's cool, man. It's cool. Each of these Zanpakuto have these really unique designs, complete with the personalities to match. My favorites being Hyorimaru, Kazeshini, and Senbon Sakura specifically. Sodeno Shirayuki's design is a pretty cool, not sure if intentional, bit of foreshadowing for Rukia's Bankai later on. Byakuya's whole fake betrayal here adds a nice little wrinkle to the whole first half of this arc, which leads to all of this extra lore that we end up getting for the Kuchiki clan later. The dialogue between Byakuya and Koga towards the end of their fight sends chills down my spine. Byakuya just lecturing him on how disrespecting and outright abusing his Zanpakuto, as well as turning into a serial killer, made him unfit to be a Soul Reaper. And then Koga's response that all of the other Soul Reapers were simply jealous of his power and for being married into the clan. Ginrei and Old Man Yama are this badass old man tandem that I wish we could see more of. And then the whole emphasis on having synergy with your Zanpakuto. Come on, this is what Bleach is all about. Ichigo, the main character, his whole story is learning to understand his powers and his place in the world. It's a beefy arc and probably one of the most horribly placed filler arcs in the middle of the Hueco Mundo stuff, but it's great, man. It's great. Yes, sir. Number 2. It's the Reigai Uprising. Some people also call it the Gotei 13 Invading Army arc. Immediately, a huge reason why this arc is one of my favorites is because it's just so damn beautiful. Especially the final battle between Ichigo and Yushima. Takes my breath away, man, but we'll get to that in a second. This is basically about a rogue scientist from Squad 12 named Kagarosa Inaba, creating this army of doppelgangers to invade the Gotei 13. Again, another one that seems mid on paper, but stay with me now. First of all, these doppelgangers are actually just a bunch of mod souls put into Reigai, the soul society equivalent to Gigai that the Shinigami use to physically operate in the human world. And Kagarosa is actually the one that invented mod souls in the first place, but that's definitely not all. Turns out Kagarosa himself is an artificial soul who's been undercover in the Science Research and Development Division for about 100 years, researching the Dangai, all for the sake of reviving this mysterious Project Spearhead, the original man that he was based off of, the actual inventor of the mod souls, a soul reaper by the name of Oko Yushima. Project Spearhead was supposed to be this elaborate strategy of placing mod souls inside of dead bodies and having them fight against hollows. Central 46 put an end to this, citing moral concerns. In reality, they just felt threatened by the potential monopoly of power that Yushima would have over all the artificial souls. And it still doesn't end there. The plot does indeed thicken, because moments before Yushima was sentenced to basically life in prison to keep all of this under wraps, he tossed all of the data acquired in his research into the Dangai to one day be retrieved by his mod soul, Kagarosa. It all comes full circle. But in the process of making him, the artificial soul inexplicably splits into two people. Kagarosa, who proceeds to avenge Yushima, like I said, and this other girl named Nozomi, who escapes to the human world and, because of Dangai time manipulation, ends up in Karakura Town during Ichigo's time after the battle with Aizen. This arc is split into two halves, really. First, the mission of reclaiming the Seireitei from Kagarosa and the Reigai, while also keeping him from capturing Nozomi, who's in the human world, who he needs to assimilate with to create the original Yushima mod soul, before the soul split into two 100 years ago. And then, because it always has to get worse before it gets better, the second act is about trying to rescue Nozomi after she gets captured, and then having to stop Yushima's revived Reigai from destroying the entire Seireitei. The first act is where we focus on Nozomi, being this tsundere character that obviously doesn't want to be saved. The second half is where we get the huge lore drop, the origin of the mod souls, as well as Yushima's life 100 years ago. Bullied for being a weak warrior, but made up for it with his intelligence. This, combined with the whole Project Spearhead fiasco, pretty much drove him insane and hyper-independent. And now that we're here, again, the final battle between him and Ichigo. I know this was a bit of an overused term in 2024, but come on, man. Between the score, the choreography, this was indeed pure cinema. God, I've already talked so much, and I feel like I still haven't even explained why I like this arc. I love this arc for a very simple reason. It's commentary on independence. Towards the end of the final battle, Ichigo gives at this point, the very manic and desperate Yushima an incredibly chilling lecture on the importance of having people to rely on. Not in a parasitic way, like Yushima's been abusing his mod souls, but just so you don't have to constantly shoulder all of these burdens by yourself. Sort of similar to the situation with Toshiro in the DiamondDust movie. And I also love how this is foreshadowed by Nozomi earlier in the arc, constantly trying to do everything on her own. Kon, of course, being a mod soul, he is all over this arc. He was the first person to kind of get Nozomi to open up a bit and be vulnerable. The Ichigo and Yushima fight isn't the only cool piece of action we get here either. We get this absolutely awesome fight between Kenpachi and his imposter in the rain, which makes it extra alpha. Yamamoto has to fight against his former students when the fake Ukitake and Kyotoku go to attack him at a certain point. Unohana is weirdly in the main investigative position here, the same spot that we usually find Shunsui or Urahara in most of the time. I like it. It's a lot of interesting ideas that they managed to execute here. And then Ichigo the entire time is also struggling with the gradual disappearance of his spiritual energy. And that little detail really helps this arc feel like it's canon, To be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I actually prefer this as a final arc to the OG Bleach series over the Fullbring arc. Fullbring always kind of felt like a weird arc to leave off on. Like, it kind of would have been much better as a prologue to the 1,000-Year Blood War, or like a movie. Fullbring will make for a great movie, actually. All right, boys, and females, if you're out there, we have finally made it. Because at number one, I think you can all guess what it is. It's the Bount Arc. Was anybody else hoping that the Bounts would show up during the war? Anybody? Even if it was just like an Easter egg, right? Like a treat for us anime fans. They ain't have to do anything important. And it probably wouldn't have made any sense either because they're dead. Spoiler alert. But like, they could have just shown up and plowed through a bunch of random Quincy fodder for fun. Just me. I love this arc, man. Phenomenal villain. Jean Kadia is the quintessential well-mannered kid turned into cold-hearted antagonist through repeated instances of negligence and outright incompetence of higher governing powers, much in the same lane as other great villains of anime like Pain from Naruto, Shigaraki from My Hero, using his charismatic personality and boyish good looks to now amass this legion of loyal supporters to his cause. The fights here are really cool. Instead of Zanpakuto, the Bounts have these dolls that are pretty much sentient creatures, extensions of their souls with actually quite unique abilities that are a mix of genuinely eccentric fighting styles and just old classics used in a clever way. But most importantly, man, this arc got aura. It's the only full filler story arc that we have from OG Bleach before everything went high definition and made it look all pretty. The soundtrack just hit different when the nighttime in Bleach looks like this compared to this. You know what I'm saying? I guess I should start this with explaining who the Bounts are. An artificial soul, another one that doesn't age and can theoretically live forever. It's just that they have to keep consuming living souls in order to stay alive. Each one of them was born in the human world, and well, humans being humans, they started persecuting them out of fear of the unknown, and because they don't age and without the context, they straight up just look like tension gets so bad that the Bounts actually start fighting back. So Central 46, once again, Lentral 46 orders a full extermination of their kind, because ultimately they were only born out of an experiment gone wrong, done by predecessors of the Science and Research Division over 1,000 years before the story began. Jean Kadia is this individual Bount that was forced to spend most of his childhood on the run, not only from Shinigami, but the Quincy as well after they fled to the Soul Society. After centuries upon centuries of genocide, calling the Bounts endangered at this point is very generous. Over time, Kadia has been making it his mission to get revenge on the Soul Reapers by assembling this team of all the remaining Bounts that exist and pulling up to the Seireitei with all of the millions of souls worth of power that he's absorbed over the years, and he's going to stand on business. And of course, there's way more to the story than that. Kadia is actually trying to recruit Uryu, the only Quincy left, burying the hatchet, essentially, and trauma bonding with him. The head of the research team that created them, this lady named Ron Tao, she effectively went rogue, risking her life doing all that she could to rescue and protect the Bounts, including Kadia when he was a kid. Then Kadia grows up and falls in love with her artificial soul Bount replica, and she also joins his group, but then they break up, and that was kind of awkward. Hey, yo, the Bounts as a group might be one of the most underrated stables in anime history, low-key. There's this guy named Mabushi that initially doesn't agree with Kadia's methods of abusing the soul consumption, but after he gets a taste of the power, he turns into a maniac. I already kind of talked about Yoshino, the Ron Tao clone. She's on this mission to stop Kadia, confiding everything in Uryu while he's being held hostage. They develop a whole thing. There's a former Soul Reaper working with Kadia, basically because of this beef that he has with Kenpachi. Bro is just bitter that his master lost his spot, so he left Squad 11 completely disillusioned of what it means to be a Shinigami. But my favorite Bount, ever since I was a kid, it's Koga. Not that one. Like, I could write an entire essay on just his character alone, but overall, he's just a really chill guy. He even ends up being the last remaining Bount. So I guess they're not all dead. This is all just me introducing the characters, by the way. This arc has 3 acts to it. Yeah, it's a long one. 2 full seasons of the anime on DVD, and a full year of this story on TV back in the day. It probably felt like forever, but as a binge, perfect. Almost. The pacing weirdly comes to a screeching halt after Yoshino dies. Spoiler alert. And this is where we get this filler episode in the middle of a filler arc, where all the mod souls prank everybody in this new battle suit, and it's kind of weird. Oh yeah, this is how we get introduced to reading Kuroto and Noba too, by the way. But yeah, the arc has 3 sections. The introduction, where Uryu gets kidnapped and Ichigo and his friends go to save him. The second part, where they have to fight against the Bito, a bunch of soul-sucking mosquitoes that Kadia sacrificed his ex Yoshino to make to expedite the power growth through soul consumption, which ends in another raid on his mansion, this time with even more Soul Reapers. And then the final fight in the Soul Society, after Uryu finally puts his foot down, using his power to help the Bounts reach the Seireitei, which kind of makes no sense, but it's okay. I'll just treat it as 1,000-year blood war foreshadowing. And the Bounts are even more dangerous in the Soul Society, by the way, where they can now freely absorb reishi from everywhere and everything, compared to only getting it from human souls in the world of the living. Kadia eventually gets his hand on the Jokaisho, a reishi generator, basically. And now, with this new seemingly limitless power, the person that steps up to face him in the end, of course, our boy Ichigo. And yeah, I'm sure you can figure out the rest. I've said all of this to say that this arc honestly should be canon. I might rate this. I think I might rate this over the Fullbring arc, to be honest. Kill the Fullbring disrespect is crazy. This whole thing at the end has kind of just been a stream of consciousness, so I apologize. The fight between Kadia and Byakuya is so unbelievably gas, bro. When the Bounts first show up in the Soul Society, Kuroto has to be my favorite of the new mod souls, kind of like Cone, but even more delinquent. Ichigo has to go through the whole formulaic 3-strike rule thing with Kadia, losing to him twice, but then winning in the end. But it's okay. You know why? Because after every defeat, we get more lore. All of the fights against the Bounts and the Seireitei go crazy. It's kind of Monster of the Weekish, with every episode a new Bount being taken out, but I really don't mind it, man. Yuri's fight against the old man with the stonefish that basically has the same powers as the Oasis stand from Part 5 JoJo. Again, it might be formulaic, but sometimes simplicity is key. Hey, man. Whenever I'm craving to watch some Bleach, I'll always throw this on and fall in love with the series all over again each and every time. This and the Ukiura fight. That will forever be peak.
If it's me, I apologize. I'm just high. So sometimes I'll just emphasize. I'm just shy, so I really need to emphasize. After this performance, check my vitals, make sure that I'm still alive. Cause I give it all, give it all, give it all, leave it all, leave it all.
But it's not over yet. What's up, y'all? Just popping in here at the end real quick. I don't think I'm gonna like edit this or even like chop this up or anything like that. All right, well, maybe I need to. Yeah, no, I just kind of popped in real quick just to say, well, first of all, I just wanted to apologize for anybody that, you know, has been waiting for this video for like 2 months or whatever. I know I've been making a bunch of community posts talking to, you know, not really adhering to the deadlines that I set for myself. So that's kind of my bad if you was expecting this. Trust me when I tell you, well, first of all, I wasn't expecting for this video to be 2 hours long, but here we are. And then, yeah, man, December was like really, truly like December was hell for your boy. I'm not going to get into it. I don't really like putting my personal life out there, especially not in my content. It's not really like this. I kind of didn't even want to do this part, but I felt like I had to say something. So, yeah, sorry about that. But I appreciate you for pulling up, which leads me to my next point, which is just thank you, man. Thank you. Because this is, you know, I guess the unofficial 4K sub celebration video. So, hey, appreciate you. Definitely for 2025, I'm looking to be a little bit more consistent on the channel. So I'm thinking about dropping some more like short form stuff that's a little bit less editing intensive, you know, so I can, you know, get them out quicker and just continue to have a presence on the site, because Lord knows, like, because it's taken me so long to put this video out, like the algorithm will not be kind to me. So please, you know, again, I don't like to do this, but please, you know, leave a like, sub up if you're not subbed up, because there will be tons and tons of content to come. But yeah, if you can't hear now, you know, a part of the reason why I took this video so long to come out is because I've been sick twice. I'm actually sick right now. So, yeah, I'm about to take my ass to bed. Once again, appreciate y'all. Now that I'm finally done this video, I can finally catch up on stuff like 1,000 Year Blood War. I'm so excited.